This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The runner-up in DRC's presidential election vows to challenge the result in court. The UN raises concerns over rising number of extremist attacks in West Africa and the Sahel region. And Nigeria launches a campaign to rehabilitate victims of human trafficking. Hello and welcome to Africa Live, only on CGTN. I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Rama joins me now with all your business headlines.
Thank you very much, Karen. Here's what's coming up a little later in the hour. Acacia Mining is fined over $100,000 as its fallout with Tanzania's government continues. And we'll look at a manhunt for a gold dealer suspected to have defrauded thousands of investors in Ghana. The details of those stories and lots more coming up for you in the course of the hour. For now, though, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Karen.
Thank you very much, Rana. The UN Security Council is expected to be holding a closed-door meeting following the elections in the Democratic Republic of Congo. France requested the meeting as world powers monitor developments from the landmark vote held last month. Opposition candidate Felix Tshisekedi was declared the winner in the provisional results. Runner-up Martin Fayulu has disputed the result and vowed to go to the highest court in the country. Well, CGTN's Li-Ling Tan has been following developments at the UN headquarters in New York, and she joins us now. Li-Ling, has the UN Security Council discussed the election result in the DRC? What's the latest that you have from there?
Hey there, Karen. Yes, the Security Council has conducted their first formal session on the DRC since the preliminary results were released on Wednesday. And on this morning, this was a crucial part of the meeting before they convene behind closed doors, where they get the briefings from some of the key stakeholders involved in the elections. So we're talking about the Electoral Commission, SENI, we're talking about the Catholic Bishops' National Episcopal Conference, SANCO, as well as the African Union. And of course, the Security Council also heard from their UN representative, the head of MONUSCO, the mission on the ground, Leila Zerugi. Now, the general consensus, or the general sense among members of the Security Council, as well as these diplomats and representatives, is that the elections was for the most part smooth and successful. But of course, we are fully aware of the challenges and the disputes that we are hearing now in the post-election climate. So this is one of the key concerns. They acknowledged the logistical and technical challenges that we've been hearing about, including the opposition to the use of the voting machines. They also, we also heard some concern about how internet access was blocked, about media being blocked, including, of course, what has been widely reported, the blocking of journalists from Radio France International. And we're also seeing that the results, the tally, the findings from SENI and SANCO do not correspond. So there's a push for a resolution of these discrepancies. So even though we're hearing some good news and some cheer about how this is a watershed moment for the DRC, that elections for the most part went smooth, were conducted professionally and correctly. We know that a lot of challenges were involved in the lead up to the elections, and now that there's a dispute on the ground, we're hearing reports of violent protests, clashes in some parts of the DRC. So delegates and ambassadors so far in this formal meeting at the Security Council chamber are calling for restraint, for stakeholders to refrain from further violence and to direct their disputes and challenges through the proper channels under DRC's constitution and electoral laws.
So, Li-Ling, with all these areas of concern, what options does the Council have?
The Council in itself, for the moment, is focusing on what ways it can help to de-escalate the tension on the ground stemming from the disputes and questions over these results. Remember that we're still that these results are preliminary, so a lot of this still has to be examined, and the Security Council is monitoring closely. Now, that said, a lot of what their discussions, some of the more sensitive aspects of this discussion, will be taking place behind closed doors, so we don't have access to that for now. What we do know is that there came a reminder from some countries, including China, about how this election is a DRC-owned process and that its integrity and sovereignty must be respected. So, for the time being, as in this uncertain post-election climate, the Security Council is calling for restraint, and also members here, whether it's the African Union or the UN mission there, MONUSCO, and other delegates, including from France, they have all expressed desire. They've all offered their continued assistance to the DRC in this post-election period and to help the country transition.
Okay, thank you very much, Li-Ling. That was CGTN's Li-Ling Tan there at the UN headquarters in New York. Well, Belgian Foreign Minister Didier Reynders has cast doubt on the Democratic Republic of Congo's election result that gave the lead to Félix Tshisekedi. Arriving for the Belgian government's weekly meeting, Reynders said Belgium now awaited the Congolese people's reaction and was working on a contingency plan to protect foreigners.
Well, first, we're going to wait and see the reaction of the Congolese people and organizations. Obviously, the result announced by the National Independence Electoral Commission does not correspond with the one that certain local observers have mentioned. They are internal procedures, so we will have to wait and see how it all plays out. The positive element is that the elections are finally taking place after more than 2 years, and that evidently it is an opposition leader who has won. Whether it's really this leader who came out on top in the polling, that's for the Congolese people to say according to the existing procedures of the country. If it is not absolutely necessary, people should not stay there. It is also important to avoid gatherings, but for the moment, we have no indications of any particular risk to foreigners or to Belgians specifically.
Well, the runner-up in the Democratic Republic of Congo's presidential election, Martin Fayulu, has pledged to launch a formal fraud complaint in the country's highest court. It's a dispute many fear could reawaken violence. Pre-election polls predicted a landslide win for the opposition candidate in a vote hoped to bring Congo's first democratic transfer of power after 6 decades of deep political instability. But in the surprise result, Fayulu lost out to another opposition leader, Félix Tshisekedi. Fayulu's supporters say authorities rigged the result on behalf of Tshisekedi in a deal to protect members of the outgoing president. Well, Chris Otumringa is in the DRC capital, Kinshasa, for us, monitoring developments, and now joins us on the phone. Chris, has Mr. Fayulu presented his petition in court yet?
Well, Karen, he hasn't, but he will do so tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Kinshasa time. Mr. Fayulu addressed his supporters in Kinshasa today and told them that he will not allow his victory to be robbed by the Electoral Commission. He asked his supporters to accompany him tomorrow in large numbers to the Constitutional Court where he'll file his petition. So tomorrow is the time that he's going to do that.
And Chris, there are fears of violence in some quarters following this dispute. Is this founded, and what's the government trying to do about it?
Indeed, the fears are real. Actually, yesterday, 7 people were reported dead in an area known as Kikwit in northern DRC because of the announcement of the election. These were supporters of Mr. Martin Fayulu who were protesting the Electoral Commission's announcement of Félix Tshisekedi as the winner. Many of Mr. Fayulu's supporters have been very disappointed about the turn of events, and the violence is indeed a reality. The Congolese government has always cracked down on any form of protest in the city or the surrounding areas around the country, and so there's likely to be a serious crackdown on these people who are going to protest tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. That was Chris Ocham-Ringa there in the DRC following developments following the election there. Well, there have been plenty of reactions coming across the continent on the Democratic Republic of Congo's election results. Ugandans have praised the democratic transition in the Central African nation.
Tshisekedi Felix, the incoming president of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, what is going to be his first assignment? His biggest task should be consensus building, consensus and confidence building. Consensus because so many people disagreeing among themselves.
We're very happy that there is no conflict right now. We are happy that an opposition candidate that was fronted has been elected, and there seems to be no dispute.
Now that there is an emerging challenge of contestation, let it be resolved, let results that are being challenged be challenged, and then this done with. For us, we should be grateful that in the neighborhood, we need a country that is stable.
Now that he's been declared, he carries a huge burden of resolving the unresolved issues, stabilizing the DRC, because the DRC has become fundamentally important in this region. Instability in the DRC is instability here. So we wish him the very best.
To other news now, the UN envoy to West Africa and the Sahel, Mohamed Imeden Chambers, warns that a rising number of extremist attacks in the region is undermining recently made gains. Chambers was briefing the UN Security Council and spoke of democratic consolidation in the region. He warned that persistent security challenges must be addressed to safeguard stability. UN correspondent Li Tan reports.
First, the good news from the UN envoy to West Africa and the Sahel. In the past 6 months, successful presidential elections were organized in Mali, regional elections in Mauritania, parliamentary elections in Togo, and on the local level in Côte d'Ivoire.
However, despite appreciable progress in democratic consolidation in the region, there is a need for continuous effort to address contentious issues around elections in order to prevent and mitigate election-related violence, as well as to support inclusive dialogue as a key attribute of inclusive societies.
But among the most pressing challenges he highlighted are increasing Boko Haram attacks in the Chad Basin and clashes between farmers and herders. In Burkina Faso, a state of emergency has been declared in 7 of 13 regions, while Niger, Benin and Togo are seeing increased attacks and kidnappings by extremist groups. And much is at stake in upcoming elections in Nigeria, Senegal, Mauritania and Benin.
The next cycle of elections in the region will be a litmus test for the consolidation of democratic gains. Ensuring the enabling environment for the full respect of human rights will be key for the success of these elections and in safeguarding stability in the region.
The security challenges are taking place against a backdrop of high population growth, youth unemployment and economic austerity. The envoy warned that discrimination against women and allegations of human rights violations must also be addressed, along with governance deficits, extreme poverty and the lack of development. Li Tan, CGTN, New York.
Well, we are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including Russia defends itself against claims that it was behind killings of 3 journalists in the CAR. And Nigeria launches a campaign to rehabilitate victims of human trafficking.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
Come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara.
No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
One of China's fellow developing countries, Sierra Leone, gets the ball rolling on the Belt and Road Cooperation for 2019. It's a country that has battled poverty and disease and done so with China's help. And now its foreign minister has visited to talk about the future. Here's CGTN's Su Yuting with more.
The first visit by a foreign minister to China in the new year comes as Sierra Leone's Ali Kaba descends on Beijing. Chinese State Council and Foreign Minister Wang Yi welcomed Kaba at the Diaoyutai State Guest House on Friday. Wang Yi said last year Sierra Leone President Bill paid a state visit to China and attended the FOCAC Beijing summit, charting the course for the future development of bilateral relations. Wang Yi recalled 5 years ago, at the height of West Africa's Ebola outbreak, China decisively extended a helping hand and stood by Sierra Leone people, winning the battle against the Ebola disease. The two ministers told the press that since their countries are developing nations, it's important to maintain their Belt and Road synergy. They also agreed that adhering to the 8 initiatives of the Beijing FOCAC summit would ensure that their cooperation is practical and mutually beneficial and will deliver more benefits to both peoples.
It is the responsibility of China and Africa and China and other developing countries to make the international governance system more fair and reasonable. What we're following is a path of just cause, and we have the support of all developing countries and people.
Foreign Minister Kaba says Sierra Leone appreciates China's help and is willing to learn from China's experience in governance.
President Julius Maada Bio has stated that our focus should be on the poverty reduction strategy, which is the heart of our new direction, and highlighting education and fisheries and agriculture and infrastructure. Those are the ways to deepen the people-to-people appreciation and exchange. And I look forward to more effort in this area to implement the 8 priorities of the Beijing FOCAC.
This year marks the 48th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and Sierra Leone. Both sides expressed the hope that the two countries will strengthen cooperation in various areas, including trade, investment and healthcare, in order to improve their bilateral relations. Su Yuting, CGTN, Beijing.
Authorities in Moscow have responded to claims that a shadowy Russian military outfit is linked to the killing of 3 Russian journalists in the Central African Republic. The reporters were shot dead while filming a documentary about Russian interests in Africa. Their organization suspects foul play, but Russian authorities say that they believe it was a random robbery. Dan Ashby has the latest.
So here's what we know. 3 Russian journalists were in the Central African Republic in July last year, and they were there to shoot a documentary about a private Russian military outfit. They were then all shot dead during an ambush on their car. Now, from here on in, there are 2 different perspectives. The first, from the man who was funding the journalist. He has commissioned his own report, and he is a prominent critic of President Putin. His report has linked the murders to the very group that the journalists were investigating. That group is called Wagner. It is, as I say, this private military group, and it is believed to be run by an associate of President Putin. Now, this report found that the journalist's driver had actually been compromised by Wagner, and that driver was relaying the journalist's whereabouts to soldiers. We also now have Russian authorities publishing their findings. They say there is no cause for suspicion around this driver, that he was just a random person, and that actually what happened was a random robbery. They also stress that the journalists had been advised that they were going into a very dangerous area. They were advised not to go in, but they decided to do so anyway. So we have these 2 different accounts, no consensus, but this will continue to make headlines in Russia, not least because in the last 20 years, 25 Russian journalists have been murdered. Dan Ashby, CGTN, Moscow.
Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa will embark on a 5-country tour next week. He's seeking support for his financially distressed country. Mnangagwa will visit Russia, Belarus, Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan before heading to Davos for the World Economic Forum.
The tour is the latest leg of an international re-engagement from which the country can expect a bounty of mega deals and MOUs, according to the presidential spokesperson quoted in state media this week. But citizens who are bearing the brunt of severe shortages of cash and fuel say the president shouldn't leave while the country is in the throes of its worst economic crisis in a decade.
Even if you can go all over the world, nothing is going to happen here. Because we've heard these stories for several years now.
There are also concerns about the financial strain on a country meant to be under austerity. During this tour, the president will clock his 26th foreign visit since taking office 14 months ago.
Mnangagwa is solving problems in an upside-down version. Our problems are local; they are not international. He has been accepted. His legitimacy is not being questioned globally. So we don't need to be spending more money going outside looking for direct investment.
But others have defended the visits, arguing that the expected dividends justify the cost.
This is the head of state, and these things we need money right now more than anything else in the country. We need foreign direct investment, and the only way we can get them is to go out there and source them. We can't get them while we are here and just sitting and looking at our situation.
Apart from investment, Zimbabwe is also looking for a financial bailout to help ease a currency crunch as well as repay arrears to international lenders. Farangwa Kutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Let's now go to Egypt, where the country's parliament spokesperson says the decision to amend the constitution lies in the hands of Egyptians. Some politicians want to amend the section in the constitution that bars President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi from running for a third term in 2022. Yasser Hakim has more from Cairo.
Salah Hassaballah, the parliament spokesman, said he has not received any request to amend or change the presidential terms in the 2014 constitution. According to the 2014 constitution, the presidential term is 4 years and the president can only serve for 2 terms. But in the last few months, a growing number of politicians, MPs and media have been calling to amend Article 140 pertaining to the presidency. There are suggestions to extend the presidential term to 6 years instead of 4. Or to add a third term in office. This would apply on current Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, whose second term ends in 2022. The reason put forth is that Egypt is in the midst of a rebuilding process. The reforms and the huge mega projects he has undertaken will need more than 4 years to achieve. President el-Sisi himself has not commented on such speculation, though he had said back in November 2017 that he would not run for a third term. In order to amend the constitution, it needs an approved vote of 1/5 of the parliament members, followed by an absolute majority in a national referendum. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is continuing his Middle East tour in the Egyptian capital. He met President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and other officials, and he announced US foreign policy in the Arab world. Here's Adel El-Mahrouhi with more.
Following Trump's decision to withdraw US troops from Syria, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has been touring the Arab world. Some Arab nations feared the move could increase Iran's influence in the region. Pompeo came to comfort these concerns.
I believe he's here for a far more important message than comfort. Pompeo is drawing the new U.S. foreign policy in the region throughout the coming years. In Cairo, he's discussing many crucial issues for the region, among them Egypt's role in the Syria post the U.S. troops withdrawal. There is a suggestion to replace them with a kind of an Arab force. In addition, they will be discussing another draft of the Palestinian crisis, so-called the deal of the century.
Pompeo has met with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the Chief of General Intelligence Abbas Kamel, and Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry. The talks were mainly concerned about security threats in the region. Both parties have renewed their commitment to deepen their older partnership in facing these challenges. After meeting the Egyptian president, Pompeo has announced the U.S. foreign policy to the Middle East for the coming years. He reassured his Arab allies that the United States will keep backing them, but his speech lacked details about how this vision will be implemented. The U.S. Secretary of State stressed that Trump's administration has had a positive impact in the Arab world.
99% of the territory ISIS once held is liberated. Life is returning to normal for millions of Iraqis and Syrians. Of course, our work together is not finished. It's almost never America's work alone. Our aim is to partner with our friends and vigorously oppose our enemies because a strong, secure, and economically vibrant Middle East is in our national interest.
Pompeo confirmed that the U.S. will work with its allies to retreat Iran's influence in the region, primarily citing its threats against Israel. Yet he didn't tackle other major Arab conflicts.
Arab leaders in particular are worried about security issues, be that extremism, Daesh, ISIS, and so on, or be that the Iranian hegemony. So in that sense, it's a positive message. The issue is, how are you going to actually help if you're going to withdraw? And secondly, okay, there are other issues in the Middle East as well, which need to be resolved. The Arab-Israeli conflict has been going on for over 70 years.
It's the first visit for Mike Pompeo to Cairo since Trump appointed him Secretary of State. He will continue his Middle East tour in the Gulf until January 15. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, Pompeo left Egypt to fly to Bahrain and then on to the United Arab Emirates. He's expected to call for increased pressure on Iran and to push for unity among Gulf neighbours still embroiled in a festering dispute with Qatar. He'll also be promoting a US-backed initiative to form what some call an Arab NATO. That would bring the region together in a military alliance to counter threats from Iran. Now to human trafficking, and Nigeria is one of the worst affected countries in Africa. This includes cross-border and internal trafficking. There's now a campaign in the country to rehabilitate the victims. Philihaza tells us more on the story.
33 years old Oliver Nwodo is a victim of human trafficking. In search of a better life abroad as a teenager, he left Abuja 15 years ago. But he was deceived by a travel agent. After almost a year traveling by road through the Sahara Desert, he only made it halfway to his destination of Italy before returning home.
I embarked on this quest to get to Europe. But on getting to Libya by road, I found out that the journey wasn't what I bargained for. Most of my friends lost their lives. Some were buried there in the desert. But miraculously, somehow, I was able to return home. And here I am, and I encountered this NGO. And I was able to learn through this NGO. I was able to be a graphic artist. And today, I thank God for my life.
The NGO, Society for the Reconciliation of Nigerians in the Diaspora, runs this center where many other returnees who are also victims of human trafficking get support to recover from their trauma. They are taught professional skills like bead making, catering and tailoring as a way to empower and reintegrate them into the society. The founder, a retired Nigerian senior diplomat, says his experience while serving abroad for 3 decades birthed this dream.
A lot of Nigerians are being repatriated from all over the world. And when they come back to Nigeria, they are not given a soft landing. Many of them are just rushed back to the villages where they come from, and they find their way back to the countries where they come from. And so I decided, from my experience, to rally around this organization called Serenade. We teach them skills, very basic skills, so they can start their lives without necessarily going back to where they come from.
According to the International Organization of Migration, about 11,000 Nigerians, mainly women, are trafficked outside of the country yearly for prostitution and slavery. Nigeria's anti-trafficking body, the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, insists it's doing everything it can.
One thing that we've done was to make sure that anti-trafficking issues are incorporated into the curriculum. for primary and post-primary schools in Nigeria, to make sure that it's deepened, it's sustained, and those things are learned. It becomes a learned behavior for young persons not to imagine that the street of Europe is paved with gold.
In addition, NAPTIP says it has convicted 365 human traffickers since its inception in 2003, with many others currently under prosecution. Although the government is making efforts to tackle human trafficking in the country, analysts say more needs to be done to improve some of the major factors that increase vulnerability to trafficking, things like insecurity, poverty, unemployment, and corruption. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, let's now go to Rama. He's got all the business news for us.
Thank you very much, Karen. Here's what's coming up in business. Acacia Mining has fined over $100,000 as its row with Tanzania's government deepens. And we look at a manhunt for a gold dealer suspected to have defrauded thousands of investors in Ghana.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sumitra Naidu. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Welcome back. The Tanzanian government has fined Acacia Mining over $129,000 2 days after the government appointed a new mining minister. Now, the charge comes following allegations of breaching environmental regulations at its North Mara mine. According to the mining company, it had been asked to verbally build a new tailings storage facility. It's a structure used to store uneconomical ore. Now, the company's North Mara mine, where operations remain unaffected so far, received an environmental protection order. The Barrick Gold-owned company has previously been accused of tax evasion to the tune of about $190 billion, and 3 of its subsidiaries have been charged by the government. Its London listing has been affected due to this prolonged spat between it and the government over that tax bill. Elsewhere, police in Ghana have launched a major manhunt for the boss of a gold trading firm called Men's Gold. Nana Appiah-Mensah is wanted for money laundering and fraud. Thousands of customers of this firm recently petitioned the government to help retrieve their investments from the firm. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai report from Accra.
The warrant for the arrest of Nana Appiah-Mensah follows his failure to pay back the investments of thousands of clients who were promised returns on their gold. Police suspect he is hiding in either Nigeria or South Africa. Interpol has been put on alert in 194 countries as part of the manhunt. The search for Nana Appiah-Mensah comes barely 24 hours after Men's Gold customers protested in Ghana's Ashanti regional capital, Kumasi. They called for government's intervention to help retrieve their money. However, the government of Ghana says while it sympathizes with customers, it will not use taxpayer money to refund them. Meanwhile, Men's Gold managers say they are unaware of their bosses' whereabouts, but they say they are cooperating with the country's Economic and Organized Crime Office.
We've been to Yoko, where we've put in our statements. We're cooperating with them for all this while. The police CID is also coming now with this. So definitely, if they call upon us to assist, we will also go there, because as a law-abiding citizen, we need to go there to give information. Whatever information we have, we will give it to the police to do their work.
But Men's Gold refused claims it was operating a Ponzi scheme and it says efforts are being made to pay back customers' investments.
We are working around the clock to make sure that we pay all customers their principal or their money. I think they should rest assured that if we bring out the final payment schedule, it's going to address all those challenges, and every customer of Men's Gold will receive his or her payment.
Ghana's Securities and Exchange Commission shut down Men's Gold in September last year for operating without a permit for 5 years. The company filed a suit challenging the suspension, but an Accra High Court has dismissed it. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Still in West Africa, Nigeria is gradually inching closer to enacting a new minimum wage law. The government over there plans to send a bill to that effect to legislators later this month to make a new wage law come into effect. Labour unions and the government have been engaged in a long, drawn-out and often very bitter negotiation over how big a wage hike should be implemented and who should pay for it. CGTN's Daji Badmus has more.
It's been one of the longest drawn negotiations over a wage increase in Nigeria. For over a year, labor unions and the Nigerian government, including governments of the country's 36 states, were locked in what seemed like an intractable negotiation at the time. The unions were unyielding, insisting on $82 and not a dime less.
The Joint Central Working Committee directs all affiliate unions, state councils, our civil society allies, the informal sector and other friends of workers and lovers of democracy to commence immediately mobilization of their union members for a total shutdown of the country from 6th of November 2018.
In the face of that threat of a nationwide strike, the government acceded to the union's demand, but it would take another round of protest and a threat of another strike for the government to fix a date for the transmission of a bill to Parliament to give effect to the new minimum wage law. That date is January 23rd, and the President has also set up a committee to work out the modalities for the implementation of the proposed new minimum wage law.
The terms of reference of the committee are A. To develop and advise government on how to successfully bring about a smooth implementation of the impending wage increases. B. Identify new revenue sources as well as areas of existing expenditure from where some savings could be made in order to fund the wage increases without adversely impacting the national development goals as set out in the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan.
The committee has 1 month to conclude its work, but whether this would affect the January 23rd deadline for the transmission of the minimum wage bill to Parliament remains to be seen. The unions are warning if this was a government ploy to buy more time, they would not accept it.
The commitment they have taken last now to transmit the document to National Assembly on or before 23rd of January 2019, that already supersedes the activities of this committee. So this committee has no interference to this journey of this document. Ours is just transmit the document to National Assembly so that you don't tie the document to the committee.
The unions are determined to have the new minimum wage bill passed before elections in just over 30 days from now. There's no absolute guarantee that is going to happen. It remains a question of wait and see. But this whole back and forth over the minimum wage is beginning to seem like a cat and mouse game. Daji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
On to North Africa now. Government in Tunisia has launched a special program designed to attract a lot more Chinese tourists into the country. The number of them going into that North African state is actually increasing. Experts say that Chinese tourists have been helpful in reviving the country's tourism sector. At this point, more than 1 in every 10 international traveller coming into Tunisia is carrying a Chinese passport.
Tunisian tourism professionals have revealed that the number of Chinese tourists has tripled from 8,000 in 2015 to more than 24,000 in 2018. The tourism ministry now aims to attract 100,000 Chinese travelers in the next 3 years. Tourism is a vital sector and the first source of foreign exchange in Tunisia.
The Chinese market is very important. We will focus on attracting more Chinese tourists. Tunisian travel agents tour operators and professionals in general view China as a promising market. A group of Chinese visitors will arrive from Algeria in February.
René Trabelsi noted that Chinese travelers are the most important foreign clientele in the North African country because they come in the fall, winter and spring seasons, while European tourists prefer the summer period.
Chinese tourists visit Tunisia to discover its art, culture, history and traditions. They usually visit the old market and buy expensive souvenirs and handicrafts. They do not only come to beach resorts. I will soon visit China to put in place a cooperation program with my Chinese partners.
The special representative of the Tunisian Tourism Ministry in China highlighted China's contribution to world tourism.
According to the China Outbound Tourism Research Institute, in the year 2000, just 10.5 million Chinese traveled overseas. That was less than 1.5% of all international travelers for that year. In 2017, Chinese tourists made 1.5 million cross-border trips.
Tourism professionals assert that the number of Chinese citizens who travel overseas continues to grow at a faster rate than the total number of global travelers. Following his return from the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation in September 2018, Tunisian Premier Youssef Chahed urged his cabinet members to boost economic exchange with Beijing. Analysts assert that the increase in the number of Chinese tourists to the North African destination is the first sign of strong ties between the two countries. Adel Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
And finally, the African Union says that it is on track to issue a new African passport designed to promote trade and the free movement of people across the continent. The AU Commission said that the issuance of this document is its top priority for 2019. CGTN's Girum Chala has the details.
The details of the new passport are set to be revealed at the African Union's forthcoming summit. But according to officials, the continent is working to achieve the plan starting from this year, and the travel document will have huge benefits to Africans.
To free the economic space, to institutionalize political relations between neighboring countries, sharing costs, realizing how close you are as brothers, for instance, Ethiopia and Eritrea. The sudden easing of the tensions has increased business. Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, for instance, between Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire together, they have about 80% of the world cocoa production. If they operate together, they can affect the price. They can decide together to have factories along those borders, and then people who have been on various other sites will begin to operate together and recognize and re-achieve the integrity which eluded them for years. They are now beginning to recognize their very common Africanness. So, there are changes taking place, and I think it's for the better.
Officials at the African Union believe the passport will
cut across families, ethnic groups without consideration, without consultation, are still with us. And those borders mark the origin of the African state. The African state as it is today is along the lines of the borders drawn up in 1884-85. So the raison d'etre, the business of African Union, really reduced to brass tacks, is trying to disentangle those knots that we're tied into.
The AU started a partial rollout of the Africa passport in July 2016. Back then, priority was given to heads of state and ministers. As of June 2018, the passport was planned to be rolled out and ready for use at borders worldwide by 2020. So now the AU says further details on the design, production and issuance of the new Africa passport will be unveiled at the 32nd summit of the AU in February here in Addis Ababa. If and when implemented on time, the step aims to unify all Africans and encourage their movement within the continent, as well as empowering countries with weak passports. Groom Tara, CGTN at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa.
I'll leave it there for the time being. Here's what's coming up at the top of the hour. We'll be looking at why Tanzania has increased its stake in the subsidiary of Bharti Airtel in the country to 49%. The company, after all, is technically insolvent. So why do this? And is it going to trigger a capital call? We'll find out live from Dar es Salaam in about an hour's time or so. Right now, though, back to Karen.
Thank you very much, Rama. We are going to a short break. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including male grooming catches on across the continent. We look at South Africa.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
More than 10 upcoming national elections, reforms at the African Union, and a budding continental free trade area. 2019 is gearing up to be a busy year for Africa. But with existing security challenges and economic uncertainties, how will the continent fare? This week, Talk Africa brings you the events to watch for on our continent in 2019. This Saturday at 17:30 GMT, only on CGTN.
Trend analysts say African young people are a lucrative target for marketeers because they're becoming more conscious of their appearance. A growing number of men in South Africa, for example, are interested in male grooming products. CGTN's Tuli Shabalala takes a look.
Male beauty parlors began popping up in South Africa a few years ago. Image-conscious men used to feel awkward being pampered and preened in salons filled with women. But male celebrities began to change traditional attitudes towards masculinity, encouraging men to take greater interest in their appearance.
It's not, in the old days we had to go to female hair salons if we wanted to cut our hair like this, or to look after our feet or nails. All those salons were aimed at females, and now it's at males, and it's great.
I'm in a comfortable setting.
South Africa has been slow to catch the metrosexual wave, but a growing middle class and the spread of fashion trends on social media has seen global companies target more products at African men.
With social media showing so many pretty pictures, essentially, and women starting to define the kind of men that they like, and you look at the rise of those kind of well-groomed men like David Beckham, for example, as women start to show that, there's that interest in that kind of man, who looks after himself, who has this, great presence and appearance. Other men are getting influenced to think, okay, well then it's not so bad. Then maybe I should look after myself a whole lot better.
Salon chains are opening men-only parlors to sell these products and meet the demands for everything, from manicures to eyebrow threading.
It's created an awakening in the market because not only are we seeing more of the sobe men coming up, but we're also seeing other people coming into the market, looking at it, following obviously on the footsteps of sobe into the male grooming industry.
The global male grooming product market is expected to reach $76 billion by 2023. It made $58 billion in 2017. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
Zimbabwe and China have over the years been engaging in a series of cultural exchange programs. Such interactions have fostered unity and cooperation and even aided in development on the economic front for both countries.
Through well-placed colors in craft and design, China and Zimbabwe have been celebrating each other's cultures. Such engagements in the cultural sector emerge as noble gestures to Zimbabwe's tourism sector, which is targeting about $7 billion worth of export earnings by 2030.
Our two countries have rich culture and history, which makes us relate better with each other. Our cooperation in tourism and hospitality requires that we explore each other's culture, cuisine, and heritage for a long-lasting courtship.
Recently, the Chinese embassy in Zimbabwe organized a music performance lecture by an internationally acclaimed Chinese artist. And even as culture presents the color, the fruitful economic synergies are at the core of the ties.
You have a great manpower, talented young people. So if we have a cooperation, then we can make good use of the comparative resources of each side. Then we can achieve development.
One of the many notable results of the cultural exchange initiatives between Zimbabwe and China is the Dream Star Talent Search, established in 2014. So far, it has churned out artists who have exported Zimbabwe's culture, while at the same time assisting them to derive value and income from their acts. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
We've got other sport after the break, including Senegal's Football League champions gear up for their CAF Confederations Cup assignment.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way. Match Point, only on CGTN.
Qualification for Africa's second-tier club competition, the CAF Confederation Cup, continues this weekend. Senegalese Premier League champions ASE DR have completed preparations for a crucial qualifier against Morocco's Berkane at home on Sunday. CGTN Sadiq Shaban has more from Senegal.
At their home ground in downtown Dakar, one of Senegal's oldest clubs is in training. Multiple champions and current holders of the domestic league trophy, they are far from former glory. The team is struggling at home and in African competitions.
Last year you take the cup from in Senegal and you go, but you don't have experience, you don't have competition, you know. This cup is other level for this cup.
But they will have to temporarily forget about their domestic problems, where they lie 7th after 9 rounds, and focus on continental duties against Morocco's Berkane at home.
We hope only that the referee will be at the same levels as the team. Often in Africa, the big issue, the big problem is the problem of referee. And when you play with Arabian team, often we have facing this kind of issue.
Over the last 3 seasons, some players from the team have left to ply their trade outside the country, paving way to a younger generation. And they are tasked with ensuring Senegal returns to the top of Africa.
We have to follow the coach's instructions closely as we prepare for this African Championship. We shall push the opposition hard in the first minutes, as we did with our previous competitors in this championship. But we must prepare for it like any other game.
The match will be one of the many continental fixtures throughout Africa, as both the CAF Champions League and the CAF Confederation Cup enters the group stage. No Senegalese club has featured in the CAF Confederations Cup or the CAF Champions League over the last 15 years. It's a profile of failure that the champions of Senegal football, Giraffe, would like to change when they face a Moroccan counterpart, Berkane, in the playoffs leg of the CAF Champions League on Sunday. Sadiq Shaban, CGTN, in Dakar, Senegal.
In the swing of celebrations to mark the club's centenary. The club was created in a cafe on the 15th of January 1919 under the French protectorate by a shoemaker and a national official, before going on to embody a national movement. Initially nicknamed the Club of Muslims because it was the first to feature a fully Tunisian squad, Espérance grew in status among local supporters. The club now boasts 45 major titles, including 28 Tunisian League championships and 3 CAF Champions League trophies, including the latest one from last year. Supporters and historians have been looking back on the development of the club.
Espérance is a very big family. When Espérance wins, everyone is happy, to the extent that if someone from our neighborhood asks for help, they give him money without realizing it. Espérance makes us happy and gives us joy and pleasure and brings us close